We are now recording. Once again, welcome everyone to This Is Your Life on Stress, the workshop edition. We're going to get going. So as I mentioned just a moment ago, this module is adapted from some of the content that we go over and go really deep into in my group program called Fearless Femmes. The next cohort of Fearless Femmes begins on July 28th. We are actually in our last week of our current cohort. We may have some attendees from that cohort here today. It's a really wonderful program for underfulfilled overachievers, people who really want to have amazing impact in the world, care about justice, care about compassion, and care about maximizing and being fully expressed as a leader. So if you're interested in this, and if you like what you see today, we've got a lot more where that came from, and I hope that you'll reach out or to learn more about it. All right, so first, I want everyone to go get a pen and paper. You will be taking notes today, but also doodling a bit. So there will be some graphic drawing that you're doing. I really recommend that you get a pen and paper for this, just to make it a little bit easier to, recreate some of the graphics that we'll do today. It might be hard to do on a computer. So take a minute to go grab a pen and paper, and I encourage everyone to post your notes on LinkedIn. This is a new thing I'm going to try, but this kind of information, this kind of content that we cover today, it's sort of merging our emotional realities and our emotional experience with our super impact-driven, structured work career environments. And my personal opinion is that this is really important to be shared. It's really important that we be talking about empathy, that we talk about emotional awareness in our workplaces. And so I just want people to start talking about this stuff on LinkedIn more. If you're comfortable sharing some of the stuff you learned today, consider it a gift to some of the people that might see your content there and get curious about how they can start doing the same. This is how we change work cultures. So we're going to be talking about stress today. And as we talk about stress, I thought it was really important to start with what we consider wellness to be. And specifically, we're not here today to learn about how to have a life completely devoid of stress or devoid of adversity. To the contrary, we want to be able to move fluidly with ease between those states of adversity, risk, adventure, and excitement. Between that and a state of safety and calm. It's our ability to adapt and move with ease between those two states that actually is our end goal. We're not here to be in a perpetual state of safety. That's actually kind of against what most of you are probably subscribed to, which is growth mindset. So, all right, as we talk about stress, we have to identify and isolate the two separate components of stress. There is the stressor, and then the stress that's created as a result of the stressor. Just because we resolve the stress doesn't mean we've addressed the stressor, and vice versa. So we're going to break this down into two parts, starting with the stress itself. A couple signs that it might be time for you to deal with your stress. You might notice yourself doing the same pointless or perhaps self-destructive behavior over and over again. You kind of oscillate between suppressing your stress and erupting with emotion and pain in a way that's a little bit unsustainable. You might turn into a bunny hiding under a hedge, and that hedge might be Netflix. It might be staying in bed all weekend. It might be a whole pint of ice cream. Everyone's hedge is a little bit different. Or, as we'll go into really deep today, your body just feels out of whack. This could be chronic pain, tension, exhaustion, fatigue. Stress is a real biological event that's actually pretty well understood. So we'll go into that today. Specifically, stress causes a physiological response called dysregulation. Hopefully that's pretty explanatory, the opposite of being super regulated. It's the opposite of that easy feeling of calm confidence that you all have experienced before and probably most of your lives, and that you certainly have observed in great leaders that you might admire. Take a look at this list. This is one of my favorite things to do with folks because there's two types of dysregulation. One is a sort of elevated, anxious, high octane hyperarousal state, and the other is a more withdrawn hypoarousal state. Hyperarousal is literally the initiation of our fight or flight complex or response, excuse me. And hypoarousal, that right-hand column, is our faint or freeze, our playing possum response. I want you guys to share in the chat, which symptoms do you guys most regularly experience? Most people are dominant in one or the other. Obviously, both people have both the fight or flight, and freeze or faint, but we tend to be dominant in one or the other. Go ahead and share in the chat. I really, I get self-centered sometimes personally. I make it all about me and my faults. Maybe that sounds familiar for you guys. I'll get anxiety, certainly, some racing thoughts. Prachi says you're hypo. Yeah, you go back and forth between the two. What specifically symptoms do you find yourself experiencing? If you're not comfortable sharing, I do want you guys to write these down in your notes. We will be coming back to them shortly. I occasionally do numbing behaviors. Ooh, compliance is a good one. It's capitulation on the surface with kind of a inner FU paired with it. It's really stressful for us. Go ahead and share in the chat. Elena says you get both of them sometimes in the same day. Absolutely. These are actually tend to be in response to a specific stimulus. So depending on what the stimulus is, you could have either of these reactions. Prachi says paralysis and freeze is so real, and withdrawal, complaining, emotional distancing. Yeah, I feel you on those. And Shelley says anxiety, defensiveness, and impulsiveness. And then maybe oscillating to distance and sulking and reluctance. Excellent work, guys. Again, this is kind of being aware of these symptoms as being something that's in response to a specific stimulus rather than some personality flaw is part of the awareness that I want to introduce today. Because specifically, this is how it fits into the stress cycle. So we've talked about how the stressor creates stress itself, right? Pretty simple there. The stress then creates these physical responses that we just talked about. And those physiological responses, when left unchecked or unrelieved, creates this self-perpetuating vortex that we see here. What happens is that physiological response, that tension, you can kind of think of it as, it gets encoded into our nervous system in a way that over time is basically indistinguishable from a traumatic event. And you can see how that encoding then becomes a stressor in and of itself. Chronic pain is a great example of this. Stress gets stored as physiological, or stress creates a physiological response, which creates, tension in your shoulders. And then you wake up in pain every morning, that itself becomes a stressor. So this is how we get stuck in the stress cycle. And it's important to note, again, like we mentioned earlier, stress itself is not bad for you. It's the stuckness that causes the problem. And the problem presents as the storage in the nervous system that just creates a lot of regulation and imbalance for us over time. So what we want to do, as opposed to kind of staying stuck in this self-perpetuating cycle, this vortex, is complete the stress cycle. So we'll talk about that in a second. But first I want to cover how we're not going to complete the stress cycle. This is how we kind of fail. We try and fail to complete the stress cycle pretty regularly. We tell ourselves everything's fine. Or we might have this reactionary kind of like self-defeating confrontational attitude of I'll show you. We might suppress our stress, just try to deny that it's there or avoid it altogether. And we turn to these strategies because it does help us regain a sense of control, right? But it really is a band-aid. It doesn't fundamentally shift or break us out of this cycle. So that control is a little bit misplaced. So we're going to talk today about how to actually get control over this stress cycle in a way that I like to refer to as agency. So we're going to break this down for each of you independently. I want you guys to recreate this cycle. Just really simple. You can just doodle it on your notes. And we're going to go through each of these nodes one at a time. So I want you to write down something specific and that actually happened to you that caused stress. So we're kind of like encompassing the stressor and the stress that resulted. So go ahead, copy this little vortex here in your notes. What is something that recently caused stress? Just kind of create an arrow, kind of like I just doodled here. And once you've done that, I want you to note which type of dysregulation you experienced. So this could be hyper versus hypo. It could be the specific symptom that you remember having in response. So go ahead and add that arrow to this node. And once you're done with that, I want you to observe and reflect on what you did to cope with, e.g., that anxiety or that irritability or the defensiveness or withdrawal. And you might actually find that you coped with it in a healthy way, which is awesome. We want to call out and acknowledge that too. Some healthy ways. We'll go over the exact specific ways that I recommend to process stress and move it through your body. But note just what your MO tends to be in situations like the one you experienced. Maybe you went for the ice cream or the Netflix to kind of make yourself feel better. All right, and so now we kind of can see how this all fits together, right? And again, not a personality flaw. It's something that we can absolutely address with way more agency. The way that we get stuck in this cycle, right, kind of manifests in a couple of different ways. The stressor itself is chronic. If you've got, I don't know, a bad relationship with your boss, you have to go into the office, or we used to have to go into the office every single day. So the stress is chronic because we're stuck in the situation that causes stress. Also, we get stuck because the stress gets stuck in our bodies because it's not socially appropriate to put an end to the stress. We might, especially as women, we get told that we are supposed to be good girls. We're not allowed to be aggressive or else we get criticized. And so we allow stress and stressful situations to perpetuate just because we're told it's not polite to put an end to it. Similarly, if you're walking down the street and a stranger does something to cause you stress, it literally might be physically dangerous to confront them or put an end to it. And so we see that we end up stuck in situations that perpetuate this stress cycle. And then that stress accumulates in our nervous system over time. So here is how we do complete the stress cycle. And this really kind of touches on the physiological nature of stress and our emotional connection to that. This is 5 ways that you can bring your physiology, your dysregulation, back to baseline and into balance for that calm, cool, collected state. These might seem kind of obvious at first, but this is actually a really powerful way to exert more agency over your stress level. Exercise, hopefully that's pretty self-explanatory. You've got all this emotion, all this tension built up, and then you can release it through physical activity. Similarly, breath work is probably the number one most high leverage thing you can do to remind your nervous system that actually it's not in danger anymore, even if it was earlier in the day. It's not anymore. It's sort of the opposite of hyperventilating, which gets your nervous system spiraling in the opposite direction. Slow breathing can really relax yourself and those around you, actually. Physical affection, laughter, creative expression, again, kind of in this theme of what things that you're capable of doing when you're safe. And reminding your body, literally putting your body through the motions of things that are categorically safe, helps your body come back into equilibrium. All it needs is a signal that it's not in danger anymore. And these are the 5 most powerful things that you can do that we know from neuroscientific research. So here is the beautiful alternative to a swirling, never-ending vortex. It is a path that takes you from a state of adversity or imbalance all the way through to a state of safety and calm. So this is literally the 5 steps required to easefully make that transition. The stressor is encountered, which naturally triggers a stress response. The physiological symptom presents itself, which you can then acknowledge, ideally in real time. As you get more fluency with how the cycle works, you can say, oh yeah, I am feeling anxious right now. At which point you can say, I know I need to complete the stress cycle because I'm experiencing anxiety, irritability, whatever. And then you can take the action of breathing, exercising, laughing, one of those 5 steps. And at that point, you're done. The way that you know that you have completed the stress cycle successfully is your body tells you. This again is it's body all the way down, as I like to say. So it's really important to stay connected to your physical sensations. And it literally physically feels like this downshift in bicycle gears, like when you're going up a hill and suddenly the pedaling gets a lot easier. That's what you can look out for as you try this in your own life. The negative feeling basically ends as simply and as quickly as it began. Now, as you try this, right, as you experiment with this on your own, you might not, the first couple times you do it, actually be able to feel or sense that downshift. And the reason for that is most of us have decades of accumulated stress packed up in our nervous system, and it's just going to be a process of chipping away at it a little bit. So we'll want to acknowledge incremental improvements as your body begins to let go of this stress. Critically important. Every day that you experience stress, you have to take this action to complete the cycle. So you don't have to do it a million times a day. Really, what we're aiming for is if you've had stress occur during the day, you do it when you get home in the evening. And with some practice, you'll notice how different stress levels feel in your body and get a sense of which days require more or less intensity to complete the cycle. So more stress equals more investment, less stress, less investment. Maybe just take a few deep breaths. The hardest part, especially for my wonderful impact-oriented type A women and fearless femmes, is you have to pause. You have to step away from the situation that's causing the stressor. Now, that might mean that you don't get as much work done that day. Sorry, too bad. You have to embrace the fact that continuing what you're doing is unproductive. It is literally mortgaging your future. I like to kind of compare it to someone racing a bicycle up a hill in a hurry. A friend cruises by in a car, offers you a ride, and you say, no, I'm in too much of a hurry. I can't possibly stop. Totally nonsensical not to take the easier, more efficient route. And yet it's a decision that we kind of make every day when we double down on the thing that's causing us stress because we want to win, we want to fix it. This is a natural problem-solving mindset, but it's in conflict with what's actually productive and a good investment for us, and it's a reality distortion. All right, so that is all the science of stress that hopefully creates a little bit more awareness about what the dynamic is between stressors and how that presents in your body. So you've got everything you need now to really be disciplined around releasing stress from your body on a daily basis. And what I want to address now is dealing with the stressor. And this is where we really cannot talk about stressors without getting into the problems around social justice and systemic inequality that we experience, especially in the US right now. This qualifies as a stressor that we can't control, at least not in a super immediate way. Stressors that we can control, I'm not really going to go into today. You guys know how to break down a problem into smaller parts and solve it one little bit at a time. If you're like the women in my group, this is something that you totally have a handle on. And so I think it's just way more important to spend our time today talking about what you're probably more interested in, actually, and certainly probably more frustrated by, which is those stressors that are outside of our control. And this includes a constant low-level stream of oppression. It includes microaggressions that you might experience every day. It includes the existing power structure, aka the hegemony, insisting it doesn't exist, basically gaslighting us into believing that it's not the world that's broken, it's just you that haven't done what it takes or don't have what it takes. It's enraging. So what we have to do first is acknowledge that this game is rigged. It absolutely is. The fact is that many categories of people are deliberately excluded from systems of power. The hegemony has rigged the game. And while it would be great if the world could, just stop telling us how broken and crazy we are, we don't have to wait for the world to change to stop feeling this way. And acknowledging that the game is rigged in and of itself has been shown to provide some physiological relief. So let's just let that sink in for a minute. We want to acknowledge this injustice. The rules are set up unequally, and it also it's designed to blind us to the unfairness of the rules. Specifically, this is a term I like called hegemonic blindness. You might be thinking like, oh my gosh, what a-holes must be out there gaslighting us in the hegemony every day. But actually, most people suffer from hegemonic blindness because that's how deeply entrenched these belief systems are. Not everyone who gaslights us is a jerk. In fact, a great example of this is human giver syndrome. Something that has resonated with a lot of the people that I work with is people who really care about others, are compassion-oriented empaths. This is the belief that you have a moral obligation to give every drop of your humanity in support of others, no matter the cost to you. Sound familiar? This is an example of hegemonic blindness in ourselves. This includes the time and effort women spend on caregiving, way disproportionately compared to men. It includes the time and effort of people of color educating white people about racism, etc. We are victims of human giver syndrome, sure, but we actually also impose it on ourselves and others because that's how deeply entrenched it is. Many women hold the implicit belief that women carry responsibility for the behavior of others. That's why we see victim blaming. We're all responsible for spotting human giver syndrome in ourselves and others. The reason for this is because of the detrimental effects of what's called compassion fatigue. So compassion fatigue has a couple of sort of tells here. One is that you tend to check out emotionally. You might minimize suffering that isn't the most extreme, like, well, at least I have a roof over my head, or at least I'm not starving. You might feel helpless, hopeless, or powerless, yet also feel responsible for doing more. And you might stay in a bad situation with the kind of belief of this refrain of, well, if I don't do it, no one will. This type of prolonged fatigue is the same as chronic stress. And as we know, prolonged stress approaches the effects of trauma over time. Caregivers actually need the same support as the people they're caring for. And when you think about it, most of the stress in our lives would probably be a lot easier to manage. Things like, I don't know, a tough project at work. It's actually not life-threatening at all. But when we're walking around with this socialized feeling of other people's entitlement to our effort, it's almost like we're walking around on this hair trigger where anything could break us. And that is my theory for why so many things that tend to be kind of pedestrian difficulties at work seem so dramatic and blown so out of proportion and cause so much stress for us, because we are just on the verge of total exhaustion because of the systemic issue, the systemic injustice. I really want to call out that the point here is not to stop giving. You are not doing anything wrong by wanting to offer yourself to others. The point instead is to, first off, reduce our bias against who is entitled to whose effort, and by extension, reduce our hegemonic blindness, and to specifically normalize giving. It is not the giving itself that's toxic. It's the other half of the equation that really causes stress. It's someone else's entitlement to everything a person might have, a person's attention, her time, effort, her body, her life. What we want is a world where everyone feels responsibility to care for one another, right? Not a world where some people give everything they have until they have nothing left. That imbalance is what causes stress. And we've also normalized asking for what we need, asking for the support that we need to get our own needs met, and we actually punish people for this. Of course we're stressed. So, okay, you must be thinking like, good Lord, this is so unfair and so enormous and so systemic. Like, what do we do? Well, giving up is certainly not the answer, right? So what we look to, and this is what stress research has sort of offered as the most powerful thing that we can do to fight against the hegemony, And that is connecting to a sense of vision or purpose or something larger from our lives. Meaning, or the purpose of our life, if you will, is not something that's found or that you're born with. It's something you make. And what research has shown us is that this sense of meaning comes from at least 3 kinds of sources, specifically the pursuit and achievement of ambitious goals, service to the divine or another spiritual calling, or loving, emotionally intimate connection with others. That's definitely what gets me out of bed in the morning. And connecting to this meaning is what allows us, what enables us to keep going when we're absolutely at the edge of our frustration with the obstacles, both the ones put there by systemic oppression or the ones we place there ourselves. Meaning is the nourishing experience of feeling like we're connected to something larger than ourselves, and it is what just keeps us going when we're absolutely at the edge. So I want you guys to recreate this cycle, just quick doodle in your notes. And in the arrow section, I want you to write your why. Maybe it's as simple as your family. Maybe it's to get to a certain financial target so that you have the security you're looking for. This takes all kinds. Everyone's vision and purpose and sense of something larger is going to be different. And I want you guys to just take a minute and connect with your why. What comes up for you when you try to do that? Is there maybe a little bit of a belief that it's too hard, that you don't have a purpose? I just want you to acknowledge what comes up for you when you try to connect to your why, and encourage you to keep it super simple. We'll talk more about this when we get into the live coaching portion. All right, if everyone's got their why, we'll keep going. So just to recap, we've covered a lot today. What is it that we're being called to do, both for our bodies, our well-being, our vision for ourselves, and in service of justice for the world? It's 4 primary calls to action here. 1, complete the stress cycle. Leverage what we know about physiology to chip away at the accumulated rage and grief. However rightful it may be, it is up to us to release that from our bodies so we're not carrying around a backpack full of bricks. Number 2, do a thing, literally anything. Whenever you feel trapped, freeing yourself from anything, even freeing yourself from sitting on the couch, will teach your body that you aren't helpless. Literally, even getting up and going for a walk will change and sort of recalibrate your body to the reality, which is that no one's physically holding you down. It really can be that simple. This, again, is not negating the reality of oppression critically, but it is how we can try to take some power back from it, is by taking action, biasing towards action. Number 3, smash the hegemony every day if you can. Make meaning and engage with your vision or purpose. Choose goals that are aligned with your something larger. We may not end the hegemony today, but we will make progress if we do this daily and are mindful of this. And 4th, and this is we'll get into the how of this in just a moment, master your mind. To a certain extent, the story that we tell ourselves about our obstacles and the injustice we endure changes everything about how we respond to it. On a certain level, we have to make meaning for ourselves that we then decide is worth the endurance of some of the injustice in the world. And this is about using our big computer brain to reframe difficulties as opportunities for strength and learning. Specifically, when something feels uncomfortable, you're probably doing something that creates more and better progress than if it were easy. It sounds obvious when you think about it, but we kind of forget this every day when we feel these negative, uncomfortable emotions. We tend to shy away from them. We go for the Netflix instead. So all of this is topics that we cover in Fearless Femmes, all the way from our physiology through our vision, really powerful goal setting and action planning. You're getting a little bit of a slice of everything that we cover in Fearless Femmes, with the best imaginable support of at least 10 really amazing impact-driven women who are conscious of what we're called to do in service of justice in the world, and just in the most beautiful way offer support on this journey. It's a 7-week program, and I hope that you'll check out this website and beccacamp.com/fearlessfemmes and get in touch with me. Reach out if you want more information. I'm offering 3 free 30-minute sessions to anyone who registered for this event, so I hope you'll take me up on that. To kind of kick off our live coaching for today, And then I'll turn the recording off once we get into this. We're going to be doing positive reappraisal, which is a strategy for mastering our mind. Positive reappraisal, there's a bunch of studies that have been done on this. It's proven to increase creativity and learning, to strengthen your capacity to cope with greater difficulties in the future. It's like emotional fitness. And it also empowers you to keep working towards goals that matter to you. Again, we can't give up. That's not on the table for us, right? And it's really important that this is not a technique that kind of like tells you to look on the bright side or find the silver lining. Like, to the contrary, we're actually fully acknowledging how frustrating the situation is, but deciding it is worth enduring anyway. That is our journey within positive reappraisal. So I want you guys to kind of start thinking about some circumstances in your life that have caused stress. Oh, real quick, just a recap for what we're supposed to be doing right now. Things that you might commit to manage your stress with more agency. Complete the stress cycle daily. Do a thing when you feel powerless. Smash the hegemony with your vision every day, and master your mind with positive reappraisal. This is the takeaway. If you remember one thing from this whole lecture, that make it this. So within positive reappraisal, try real hard to believe it's worth it. Usually doesn't work, right? We want to do a little bit more of an analysis to really get our bodies, our physiology, our hearts aligned to the fact of our agency and the fact that we're making this choice to endure some challenges and some obstacles. And the framework that I'll offer for you, it covers 5 components. This is a way to leverage your emotions and your thoughts to get the results that you want in spite of difficult circumstances. So the basic frame here sort of is a linear connection between each of these 5 things. You create thoughts about your circumstances, right? So cold hard facts, there's a book on my table right now. I might think I hate that book, or I might think I love that book. With either thought will create a different emotion, right? So choosing our thoughts mindfully actually generates an emotional experience for us. Those emotional experiences create and enable a set of actions. We are feeling beings, not thinking beings, which we love to imagine that we take all of our actions rationally. It's just not true. We take actions from a place of emotion. So if you are feeling yucky or feeling negative, it's going to be a lot harder to take actions that are positive and happy and excited. People will tell that you're not coming from that place. And that actions, obviously, are the one thing that actually get us results, which creates a new set of circumstances. So I'll go ahead and we're going to stop recording now because I want to preserve the privacy of everyone who is in this group. But I'll send out some of these slides and this framework to folks who watch the recording, and you can see an example of this in action. But I'm going to finish the recording now. Thank you for everyone who's watched this recording after the fact. And let me know, please, if you've got questions and take me up on that free 30-minute session. All right, let's get this recording off.